Now, what's the evidence? What effect does an exercise program have on the function, quality of life and participation in young people with an intellectual disability?
So we only looked at evidence in the last 10 years to keep it recent and relevant, and I've broken the results up into a few different categories. So the first category was body structure and function. So the first study in 2009 looked at motor function but also blood oxidative status. So blood oxidative status is the level of antioxidants versus the level of free radicals in your blood, which in people with Down syndrome there is higher levels of free radicals than antioxidants, which leads to effects such as early aging. So this study found that a 16-week, 3 times a week judo program had improvements in motor function but also increased blood oxidative status. So this is just something to keep in mind with Down syndrome, as it has implications for future programming on duration and intensity. The next study by Lin and Wang in 2012 was a randomized controlled trial of a 6-week strengthening program, and they found direct improvements in handheld dynamometer strength and agility performance in adolescents with Down syndrome. I think this is important because not many studies look directly at agility performance in people with an intellectual disability. So the next study in 2009 looked specifically at aerobic exercise, an 8-week program which I think was quite high intensity. It was 30-minute sessions 5 times a week. They found significant effects on lung function, so the FEV1 increased by 160 mils, which is 7% over control, and the forced vital capacity by 330 mils, which is 11% over control. This is a statistically significant effect, but perhaps not a clinically significant effect, as it was below their MCID. However, this effect size in other populations they've found has been shown to reduce the incidence of respiratory infections, so there might be a clinical significance there. The next study by Park and Kim in 2014 was a meta-analysis of strengthening interventions, and they found high-quality evidence to show that resistance training directly improves muscle strength in children with cerebral palsy. They also recommended that the optimal frequency and intensity was 40 to 50 minutes 3 times a week, which I think is important, as this was the only study that recommended a specific dosage, which is very important in this population. The next systematic review in 2017 was of active exercise interventions, which was basically any type of exercise where the young person with cerebral palsy actively participated in the exercise. And they found moderate positive evidence for physical fitness training and functional task practice, and strong conflicting evidence for functional strength training. Overall, their recommendation was that active exercise interventions are effective in improving gross motor function in ambulant children with cerebral palsy. And the final study was a randomized controlled trial in 2010, which looked at a 12-week strengthening program. They found improvements in strength, but they also found a detraining effect after 6 weeks, which is consistent among young people without a disability, but it highlights the need for long-term consistent participation among this population to maintain those strength improvements. So the next component of health we looked at was activity and participation. The first study by Wu et al. In 2017 was a randomized controlled trial looking at a cross-circuit training program. So that was a varied mix of exercise interventions. These included aerobic, anaerobic, power, and strengthening interventions. They found improvements in dynamic balance, vertical jump performance, and cardiorespiratory fitness. This study specifically looked at overweight people with intellectual disability. So people with an intellectual disability are at higher risk of being overweight due to a number of factors such as lower physical activity levels, different medications, lack of available appropriate facilities and staff to help out, a poor diet, and a genetic predisposition. So it's important to take this into account when you're programming for a young person with an intellectual disability. The next study was a Cochrane review in 2017, and they found that mixed training, so training that involved a mix of aerobic, anaerobic, and strength training, was found to be the only exercise which definitively improved participation among young adults with cerebral palsy. And for children with cerebral palsy, aerobic exercise may result in a small improvement in gross motor function. The next study was a Pedro synthesis in 2016 by Stubbs and de Jong. They found that strengthening interventions were associated with improvements in gait, spasticity, strength, and gross motor function in young people with cerebral palsy. However, they were unable to determine what aspects of the strengthening program specifically improve the outcomes, so there's a need for further research there. The next study by Hardy and Fetters in 2017 was a systematic review which found positive effects for exercise on both activity and participation. So activity-wise, there was improvements in gross motor skills, stair climbing, bike riding, work tasks, jumping and dance. And in participation, there was improvements on the PEDS QL scale, cognitive emotional barriers to exercise scale, exercise perception scale, and life satisfaction scale. So I think this is an important one because participation in this population is a difficult one to measure and accurately track. So I think this is an important result and an important systematic review. So the next study was a randomized controlled trial in 2011, and they found that strength training twice a week for 10 weeks had improvements in leg strength but also in stair climbing ability. But they also found that the increase in working load over the 10 weeks was greater than in post-intervention testing. So there might be some discrepancies there between actual ability and perceived ability. And the final study I found looking at activity and participation was a systematic review in 2016, which looked at the effect of exercise on skill-related fitness. They found improvements in agility, power, reaction time, and speed. So the next aspect of health we're looking at is the social or quality of life aspect. So first and foremost, a study by Shields and Taylor in 2015 looked at a walking program among young adults with Down syndrome. And probably most important initially is they found that a physical activity program is feasible and safe in young adults with mild to moderate intellectual disability. So that's something important to get right first. So the next study in 2014 was in the Netherlands, which was similar to the FitSkills program at La Trobe. So it's a 6-month bi-weekly exercise program with both aerobic and strength training components. They found significant physical improvements in aerobic fitness, anaerobic fitness and muscular strength, and also a significant effect for walking capacity. But also more importantly, they found significant improvements on parent and self-reported emotional and physical domains of the health-related quality of life scale, and also significant improvements on the parent-reported total health-related quality of life scale. So this is one of the only studies that looked directly at health-related quality of life, and they found significant improvements on both the individual's report and the parent's report. And the final study was a randomized controlled trial in 2012, which involved young people with cerebral palsy doing a 3-month stationary bike cycling intervention, and they did find a significant effect on emotional well-being aspect of the health-related quality of life scale. And the final component we're going to look at is the effect on the student mentors themselves. So there was 2 studies done at La Trobe. They're basically the same study, and they looked at a gym-based exercise program with individuals with Down syndrome. The first results found a positive change in student attitudes, self-rating of professional behaviour, so how well equipped they felt to work with people with a disability, and also their confidence in working with a disability. And then through another study, they also found a self-report improvement in clinical skills, professional skills, and improved understanding of intellectual disability in young people. And the researchers also found that these qualities translated over into desired graduate capabilities. So it was going to benefit the students when they went to get a job, which was quite important for us as students. So to summarise, there's significant benefits in all aspects of health, but also with the student mentors. It appears that a combination of resistance, aerobic and anaerobic is likely to be most beneficial for participation and health-related quality of life. Specifically, resistance training obviously has direct improvements in strength and in functional tasks. Aerobic training obviously improves lung function specifically, but also has improvements for health-related quality of life. And general exercise has improvements for skill-related fitness, activity performance, gross motor function, and gait. Programming should take into account oxidative stress, detraining effects, and optimal intensity. So there's a few important things that we talked about. But basically what the evidence is saying is that any sort of exercise is going to be beneficial in different ways in this population.